Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for coming out on this chilly night to spend some time with us. The Network for Women's Lives, which is sponsoring this program this evening, was founded in 1992 as a response to a need found in our communities, a need to eradicate domestic violence and to work toward the prevention of the abuse of women. As an all-volunteer organization, we are dedicated to the prevention of domestic violence through community education programs such as this evening and the various programs that we sponsor in area towns and schools. And as the demand for our work has evolved, we find ourselves addressing such needs as risky behavior among teens, teen dating violence prevention, anti-bullying programs for our youth, and internet safety. We collaborate and partner with other organizations such as Domestic Violence Services, DVAP, and the Roundtables. Some of these agencies deal with direct services to victims. Our mission is primarily prevention, our vehicle, education. And we welcome interested men, women, and youth to join us in our goal of creating healthy and violence-free communities. On this date, November 19th, we are joining with 780 other organizations from 119 countries around the globe to commemorate the World Day for Prevention of Child Abuse, which was launched in 2000 by the Women's World Summit Foundation. A few quotes from UN documents. Child abuse is a global problem, one that has no respect for boundaries of geography, culture, or creed. Another quote, no violence against children is justifiable. All violence is preventable. Founded in 1991 in Geneva, Switzerland, as an urgent call to action at the first UN World Summit for Children, this humanitarian organization, Women's World Summit, is dedicated to help implement the rights of women and children to be protected from abuse, to be protected from exploitation, to be protected from violence. For we believe that prevention must be the hallmark of reducing abuse and violence. And so tonight, we are honored that our speaker, Joan Rubin Deutsch, has agreed to be with us to address some important issues in her talk entitled Lost Childhoods and Broken Dreams, the Legacy of Domestic Violence. A psychotherapist, licensed clinical social worker with a private practice in Acton, Joan is also the author of Why Can't I Ever Be Good Enough, which is available if you wish to have your own copy. She's also been editor of our booklet, Love Isn't Supposed to Hurt, which has been prepared under her able supervision, and which the network has distributed to all the area high schools in order to promote healthy behavior and relationships among teens. Joan has been a supporter of our network and a member of our board of directors, and we're very happy to present her to you this evening. Joan?
I was very honored to have been asked to speak tonight, and what I am going to discuss with you is domestic violence and the impact on children who are the witnesses of this in their early childhood. I'm looking at domestic violence from the perspective of the children who are witnesses to the violence and who may be abused themselves. I'm going to also be discussing trauma and what trauma is and what trauma symptoms are. I'm going to look at the legacy of violence as children move into adulthood, how it impacts their self-esteem, their ability to feel safe in the world, their ability to manage their emotions, to have relationships that are meaningful, to accept love, to give love, and to feel stable in these relationships. And then I will talk some about healing. Now, this is a very broad subject, and I have, as far as I'm concerned, a small window of time. Each segment could be a day-long or a week-long workshop, and so I'm hoping to present a picture. I'm hoping to present a picture that will give you some sense of what it is like for children who grow up in violent families and how I believe this is a multi-generational issue, and affecting not only our culture but worldwide. Some of you may be here because you are clinicians. Some of you are here because you are involved with the network or with DVAP or other organizations that provide supportive services to battered women. Some of you are here because you know someone who is in a situation. In fact, someone spoke to me briefly when I was coming in that they knew someone who was going through this and wanted to know how to address this.
It's still hard to hear you. At least I'm having difficulty.
Okay. All right. Some of you are here because you are those battered women. Some of you are here because you are the children who grew up in violent families and who witnessed this violence. And I am here to bear witness to those of you who struggled with violence in your families and who have been impacted by this violence. I am here to say that it was not okay, that it was not all right for you to live in such turmoil and such chaos. I am also here to affirm that you do not have to live your life as a victim, that you do not have to continue to grieve and be sad and be fearful, that life holds promise for you, and that if you work through the healing process, that you can look at life as something that's promising for you. And if I didn't believe that, it would be very silly for me to be a therapist. And so I will proceed, and we'll talk a good deal later on about the healing process, because it's very important to know that life isn't full of fear and doesn't have to be. Childhood is meant to be a time of promise, a time when children are enveloped in a nourishing and nurturing environment where they can be who they were meant to be, where they're given a solid inner foundation through the messages they gain through their parents and through the relationships that they have with their family members. This is a time for children to integrate concepts about what relationships are, what love is about, what support is about, how to express themselves, how to say, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm mad at you, to question things and to get appropriate responses, to get held and comforted. It's a time for children to begin to develop a sense of self as separate from others. It's a time for them to learn to be responsible, but also a time for them to learn that they can play and be children. It's a time for children to go out into the world and observe and experience the world, and then to come home and discuss with their families what these experiences have been and whether they've been positive or negative and how to problem solve. A family is responsible for providing safety and security and clarity and consistency, because along with love, children need consistency, children need rules. They need to know what is expected from them. They need to know that they can trust their families. I have a story about my daughter Elizabeth that I love to tell. Some of you might have heard this story, but it's my favorite story, and it just illustrates how important it is for children to have clear, consistent messages. When she was 10, a friend of hers called and wanted her to go play at her house, and she said, Mom, can I go to Katie's house? And I said, no. And she said, that's not fair. Why can't I go? And I said, because I said no. So she was very angry and she went upstairs. And I thought, what was that about? Why did I say no? That was so arbitrary. That was not fair. That wasn't reasonable. So I went upstairs and I said, Elizabeth, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I said no. Of course you can go to Katie's. And she looked at me and she said, I don't like it when you do that. I don't like it when you say one thing to me and then you change your mind and you say another thing to me. It confuses me inside. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to think about the response you want to give to me. I want you to spend 10 minutes making a decision. It's in my book, it's true. And then you come to me and you tell me what your answer is. And if I don't like it, maybe I'll be angry, but that's okay, I'll get over it. I just need to know that what your answer is, and I need you to be clear with me. And I just thought, my God, this is really an amazing thing that this kid is telling me what she needs from inside. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing. And I honored that, and I always honored that. And I always waited before I made decisions, and I always thought through what I wanted to say to her, and I was always clear and consistent. And I love that she could come to me and say, this is what I need, and this is how it feels inside. And that is how it feels inside, and it feels like that inside for all of us. We all need clarity, and we all need consistency, and above all, our children deserve that. We are all born with great potential. We all have gifts, and we all have talents that need to be developed. The greatest gift that we can receive from our families is for them to affirm and encourage this potential so that we can become who we were meant to be. When children are brought up in families where there is violence, they learn very early on that life is chaotic, that life is fearful, that life is painful, and that life is crazy. How are these children to internalize the concept of emotional safety when their dad is raging at their mom, or when their mom is raging at them, or when they have to hide in closets to protect themselves or their siblings from abuse, when they have to listen to their mother being beaten or raped, when their mom and dad are drunk and not present for them, when their needs are not being met, when the very people that they need to trust to take care of them are not taking care of them. There is chaos and there is confusion all around them. These children are not allowed to express their feelings. In fact, these children are given a very clear message that they need to keep secrets from the outside world about what is going on in their families. These children are hypervigilant, ever watchful, waiting for something to erupt. Instead of focusing on play and on being a child, these children are just trying to survive. They're getting on with the business of survival in their everyday lives. They may be told that they need to participate in the violence. Sometimes they're threatened that if they don't participate in the violence, something will happen to them. They make deals sometimes in order to protect someone in the family. I had a client who made a deal with her father who was sexually abusing her. I will let you do this to me if you leave my sister alone. And she had to deal with that all her life, and she took that on. So there are a lot of binds that these children have to deal with. These children who grow up in violent families are often overly responsible, trying to take care of moms, trying to take care of siblings, trying to keep the world safe for the people in the home. They become the parent. Their emotional and psychological and spiritual development is jeopardized. Within these families, promises are consistently broken and dreams are never encouraged to develop. Survival becomes a day-to-day task. Everyone in this family is a captive to the war that's going on within it. And then there's the aftermath of the violence and dealing with an injured parent or sibling. And these children may feel that they are to blame for the violence. that they said the wrong thing, that they did the wrong thing, that they could have prevented it, that they should have prevented it. And they may feel guilty that they were not abused. It's a very emotional subject, and I keep thinking what's coming to me, unfortunately, are pictures of people that I have worked with, and that's why I falter a little bit, because it's such a hard subject, and because I've, over the years, worked with so many men and women who have been abused as children. And so as I'm speaking, I'm getting pictures of these people, and I'm thinking, do I want to tell this story or that story or not tell the story? So that's what's going on for me. And then these children may have to leave home if the police have been called, or if mom takes the children and goes to a shelter. And so they've left their home. They've left their fathers, which can be very difficult, and they're really torn because they may love their parent, but yet they're terrified at the same time. They leave pets behind, which are very meaningful for them. These animals may be the one creature that they feel safe with and that comforts them and nurtures them. They leave friends behind. They leave their schools behind. So their whole life is disrupted. And they're dealing with all this betrayal. These children are being traumatized. Now, there are different kinds of trauma and different levels of trauma, and it depends on the context in terms of how they deal with the trauma. For some children, there may be an episode or two, and then the parents may heal, and they may get attended to, and so they may grow up just fine. They may be easily able to overcome it. I'm not talking about those children. I am talking about children who grow up with ongoing turmoil in their families. It can be physical violence, it can be verbal abuse, it can be lots of threats, it can be emotional abuse, and these are the children that I'm addressing, where there's a chronicity, and that it's ongoing. Now, some children can be exposed to one episode and it can traumatize them for life as well, so I just want to make that statement, but basically I'm talking about living in a home where there's violence, and the violence could be twice a year, and then the rest of the year things can be okay, but then that's traumatic as well, and even more so because things are okay, things feel fine. Mom and dad are getting along, or I'm getting what I need, and then all of a sudden something erupts, and then all of the trust that they had that things were going to be okay is taken away from them, and so they're re-traumatized and re-traumatized. Children are very tuned in to what's going on in the family, and even if there's not, sometimes people are, women can be beaten in their bedrooms away from the children and think that, and the parents think nobody hears what's going on. But children hear, children know everything. Children are so sensitive and tuned in to their parents and to their families that even if mom pretends that everything is okay, the child feels her energy. Our families shape and form us. Who we are and how we live our life is it has very much to do with how we have grown up and what we have learned from our families. It's really interesting to me how many times people will come in and present their depression, their anxiety, relationship issues, and have absolutely no concept of how their childhood experiences have impacted them in their adult relationships. There doesn't seem to be a connection to them until I point that out. One woman telling me in her 40s that she's been married several times and has had very sad relationships and with very weak men. And she's always been given herself over to these men who are very needy, but in the end they end up manipulating her and she ends up alone. And she's a very bright, articulate, warm, lovely woman, and couldn't understand why this was happening to her. And in our first session, of course I did the history, and her father was an alcoholic who was very angry. And what's interesting is when I was talking about this violence being multi-generational, her father grew up in a violent family, her mother grew up in a violent family, and the parents promised each other that they would never hurt the children, that they would never be violent with their children. But when father was drinking, he would withdraw, he would get angry, he would rage, he wouldn't hit anybody, and mom would protect the children. She would take them out of the room. She would make sure they were in another room, but this woman grew up with this fear of her father being angry and what that would mean. And so she ended up in unsuccessful relationships. And when I pointed out that her father was an alcoholic and she was an adult child of an alcoholic and that he was violent and she grew up fearful, she just said, oh my God, how could I have not seen that? How could I have not known that? It's important to know where you've come from and to understand where you've come from. Let me give you some facts, some of which some of you already know. Domestic violence affects every member of the family. It is impossible to live in a violent family and to not sustain damage to your emotional self. Families under stress produce children under stress. Approximately 5 million children per year witness a domestic violence episode within their home. Children of battered women are up to 15 times more likely to be physically or sexually abused and neglected. 80 to 90% of children living in a home where there is domestic violence are aware of the violence I just talked about. They may not witness it directly, but they're aware of it. In families where the mother is assaulted by the father, daughters are at risk of sexual abuse 6.5 times greater than girls in nonviolent homes. And male children who witness violence are more likely to batter than those children who live in nonviolent homes. And so the multi-generational piece that I want to just mention here is that if fathers batter, it's very likely that they came from a home where their father was battering, who came from a home where his father was battering, who came from a home. And for women, if they're victims of abuse, it's very likely that they grew up in a traumatic family. Now, I'm not saying that all women who are abused grew up in a violent family. I'm saying that women who are abused, I'm going to get this straight. I'm saying that women who grow up in violent families are more likely to be abused. And so these children grow up, and the son is likely to be a batterer, the daughter is likely to be a victim. At the very least, there will be anger problems and emotional issues and grief and sadness and loss and difficulty trusting and making healthy relationships. Traumatic experiences shock the body and the emotions. Traumatic experiences challenge core beliefs about safety and trust. Trauma refers to the wounding of the emotions, the spirit, beliefs about the world, your dignity and your sense of security. The assault on your psyche alters normal ways of thinking and feeling. During trauma, you touch the death of yourself or the death of another and are or feel helpless and vulnerable. It leads to the thought that you don't know who you are or what to believe anymore. These children suffer the loss of invulnerability, the loss of an orderly world, the loss of a positive self-image because they feel so helpless and so vulnerable. They feel rage and anger at themselves because there must be something wrong with me. Remember how children are so narcissistic, the world revolves around them? That if something is going wrong in the family, it's because I've done something to cause this. And they feel angry with others. They feel grief and they feel depersonalization. They're not a human being anymore. There's a stripping away of the personhood when there's trauma. When trauma occurs, there are three responses. There's fight, there's flight, and there is freezing, just becoming paralyzed. Sometimes what these children do when they see violence, and it's, it might be surprising, but Dad and Mom could be screaming or hitting each other over here, and the child is here watching TV, playing on the computer, completely dissociated, completely separate from what's going on over here. And it's the way to cope. It's the only way they can cope. They have to shut down and numb themselves because it's just all too much and it's all too bizarre. And especially if the trauma is induced by someone that they trust. There are 4 basic types of trauma: emotional trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma, and endurance trauma, which is a prolonged sense of feeling unsafe in one's world during childhood. That's what I'm talking about. Children lack the emotional and cognitive development and life experience to make sense of the trauma, to organize it. They don't know how to tell the story about it. They don't know what to do with it. It's just this crazy, insane thing that's going on in their world. And it leaves its marks. Unresolved trauma leads to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the symptoms are the after effects of an event or series of events that profoundly alter a person's thinking, feeling, and physical reactions. As described by the DSM-3, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual put out by the American Psychiatric Association, it describes PTSD as the following. The person has been exposed to a traumatic event in which both of the following were present. 1, the person experienced, witnessed, or was confronted with an event or events that involved actual or threatened death, or serious injury, or a threat to the personal integrity of self or others. The person's response involved intense fear, helplessness, or horror. And one of the PTSD reactions are flashbacks, and I'm going to talk more about that later, but flashbacks are memories of a traumatic event in which the person feels that they are experiencing it in that moment. So that you may have a memory of something that happened in childhood, someone who's having a flashback will have a memory and be in that moment. They will be 50 years old watching a movie and then something triggers them, and they're 5 years old and they're being beaten and they're crying. And it's important, and I'm going to talk a lot about triggers because in healing people really need to understand their triggers and what to do when they're triggered so that they don't get caught up in this flashback experience. It's very scary, and it can happen like that, like a trigger, just like that. You can be fine, and then all of a sudden, you're in some other space, other time, and you're not even present in your world where you are. You're gone. Here are some common physical, emotional, behavioral, and social reactions to trauma in children. In other words, when they're traumatized, these are some of the experiences that they have. Emotional responses would include depression, withdrawal, anxiety, intense fear, feelings of helplessness, feelings of hopelessness, loss of control, generalized anxiety. So those are just some of the things that these children might be feeling. Physical responses would include stomach aches, headaches, tightness of the chest. Now this would be for anybody experiencing trauma, but I'm kind of focusing on the child. And psychosomatic complaints. Behaviorally, what happens to these kids is they either act out or they withdraw. They are aggressive, or they may be passive. They may refuse to go to school. They may do a lot of caregiving to their parent, who's so weak and vulnerable themselves. They lie to avoid conflict. Well, of course they do. They may seek attention. There may be bedwetting and nightmares. They may have difficulty learning, or they may do quite the opposite. They may focus on their studies as a way to escape what's going on at home. They can be very manipulative, very dependent, and have lots of mood swings. Socially, these children may isolate from friends. They may have stormy relationships and may always be getting into fights. They will have difficulty trusting in relationships. They will have poor anger management skills and poor problem-solving skills because they're not taught what to do with their emotions and how to negotiate differences. They may, as one woman told me, when I was a teenager, I stayed out of the house most of the time. I lived at my friend's house. I got involved in every school activity. I was very popular, and I looked great. But I was a mess inside, and this is what I did to take care of myself. These children may be very passive with peers, or they may start bullying. They may be involved in explosive relationships. You need me to speak louder?
Yes, please.
Okay. How's that? Okay. They may be involved in explosive relationships, or they may be the perpetrator, or they may be the victim. So I've talked about childhood, what childhood is like for these children, what it is they're dealing with, what it is they're struggling with, what their families look like, what their needs are that don't get met. And for some of these children, the best way to cope is to become numb, is to shut down, is to not let the feelings in because they're so overwhelming and they're so scary and there's no place for them to go. There's no one to trust. There's no one to talk to. They're just living day to day, trying to get through it, thinking that this is what the world is like. The world is a scary place because what do we know about the world when we're children? We only know what goes on in our families. And for some of these kids, going out and visiting other kids it's a whole other experience. Like, people are nice to each other. People sit down and have dinner together. Families talk to one another. It's a very sad experience. These kids don't have a normal life experience. And they don't bring friends home either, because home isn't a safe place and they never know when something is going to happen. So they're kind of isolated at home, or else they're spending a lot of time, if they're allowed to, outside the home. So there's no safety, there's no security, there's no safe boundaries. The rules change from day to day. There's explosions here and there. Mom is scared or dad is scared because, we really have to say that there are violent women. And they may not be necessarily physically abusive, but they can be verbally abusive and psychologically abusive. Violence is violence. Trauma is trauma. So what happens to these kids as they move into adulthood? When a child grows up in a family where there's violence, where they don't feel safe, where they don't feel nurtured, where they don't feel secure, where they feel rejected, there are going to be consequences. Moving into adulthood, they carry all the memories and all the experiences of the little girl or the little boy that they were. It doesn't disappear. Who we are doesn't disappear just because our bodies grow. Our emotions are carried along with us. And so all of these experiences come with us, move with us into our adulthoods. And so these children carry with them the legacy of pain and of fear and of grief. And this is their inheritance. How very sad, how very awful. And it undermines their sense of self. and impedes their potential to be who they were meant to be. Can't read my writing. So, and they're so conflicted within, because it really costs them in terms of their adult relationships. And I'm going to talk a whole lot about that because it's so important. What these children want more than anything is to be loved. What they fear most is to be abandoned. To open up and to let someone in to love them means that they are vulnerable and that they are going to be hurt, or there's the potential to be hurt. So there's a lot of fear about letting yourself be loved. And I'm going to talk a whole lot about that. So let's talk about some of these legacies. Pretending to be okay. Remember, I was talking about people who, I don't know if I said this or I was thinking this, but sometimes someone will be telling me about their childhood and the pain, and they'll be smiling. And I'll say, do you realize that you're smiling? And they'll say, no. How can that be? Because they're so used to shutting down inside, and they're so out of touch with what's going on inside. And they're so used to pretending to be okay that the world thinks they're okay. So they walk through their life smiling, and they're in pain. So that's a legacy, not knowing what's going on inside, not being in touch with your feelings and your thoughts. Being fearful, that's another legacy. Fearful, being fearful of being hurt, fearful of being alone, being fearful that you're crazy. Remember that when you don't get nurtured, when you don't get consistent messages, when things change from day to day and you don't know what to trust and you don't know who to trust, and you're just, flying by the seat of your pants, basically. These kids are flying by the seat of their pants. They're pretty much parenting themselves. They don't internalize solid inner messages, so they don't know who they are. They don't know what they think, and they don't know what they feel. And what they think and feel may seem crazy to them, or they're checking out constantly. Is this okay? Do other people feel like this? They're afraid to express themselves. They're afraid to say things. So they walk around always being fearful, always having fearful thoughts and fearful feelings. Another legacy, needing to be self-protective, obviously. Making decisions that they're not going to let other people in so that they don't get hurt. As one man told me, I decided when I was very young that I was not going to get married because I didn't want to get hurt. And he came to me when he was 40 years old and he was single, and he said, I'm 40 years old and I'm single and I don't know why I'm single. And it was only when, we'd been meeting for a while that he finally said, when I was little, I made this decision that I was not going to get married because I didn't want to go through what my parents went through. Bingo, here it was. And then the work was, of course, how to get him to break that internal contract that I'm not going to let anybody in. He was so terrified of being hurt that he built walls to keep other people out, but he kept himself isolated behind these walls, which was the very last thing that he wanted. He wanted connection. But of course you're going to be self-protective if you've been hurt over and over and over again. Another legacy is hypervigilant, ever watchful, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the next thing to happen. And if something good happens, you're waiting for the bad thing to happen because bad things always happen. Looking at people in terms of, looking at facial expressions, at mood shifts, at listening to tones of voice. So that they can either mediate an eruption, which is what they may have had to do as a child, or run away. I had a client who grew up in a home where there was violence. Her father was violent. And so what she learned to do, literally, was to sing and dance, to entertain her family, so that when she saw that her father was getting tense, she would come in and do a show and get everybody laughing and just keep everything calm, keep everything peaceful. When she grew up, she married at 19. She went from her father's house to her husband's house. And what did she know at 19? Guess what kind of a man she married? A violent man. Now, he wasn't physically abusive, but he was volatile. And he was not an alcoholic, but he was volatile. He would scream and yell and rage. And so what did she do? She didn't sing and dance, literally, but she sang and she danced. She entertained, she mediated, she modulated, she, protected her children. She tried to keep things calm. She had migraine headaches a lot. Well, that's, understandable. Of course, she had all that stress and all that tension. And by the time she came to see me, she was 59, and she was not wanting to leave the marriage necessarily, but she was trying to figure out how to survive in the marriage. And fortunately, her husband was willing to do some therapy. He did some couple sessions with me. And he did go to individual therapy, and he did agree to take some medication, so things toned down some. It wasn't perfect. It didn't turn into a wonderful, ending with this, they rambled off into the sunset together, but it became more manageable. What my client learned was that she had a voice, and that she learned to speak that voice. She learned to say, this isn't okay. You cannot speak to me this way. You are being abusive. She had never voiced this before. And as she started speaking, her husband would at least back off and realize that he was having an impact on her, because he didn't even know. He was so unaware of what was happening. So she, eventually left therapy, and at least she felt more empowered. She had more of a sense of herself. She understood more about where she came from and how it had impacted her and why she had chosen this man. And so she grew from that experience. And I want you to hear that, that doing therapy, people think that if they're in relationships and they come to therapy, that it's all about the divorce. It's all about how you end the marriage, and it doesn't have to be like that at all. And I want to assure you that, but it's about empowering yourself. It's about growing, and it's about healing. Carrying wounds, that's another legacy. Children want and need to be listened to, valued and respected and loved, and to feel okay and to feel that they're safe. But when they're hurt over and over and over again, when there's no consistency, when their individuality is not respected, they become very sensitive, and they become wounded very easily. So that small things might cause a big reaction, which may really be frightening to the partner or very strange, and they don't know how to handle it. One woman and her husband told this story of, she made a lasagna. She spent all afternoon making this lasagna, and at dinner she said, how's the lasagna? And he said, it could use more red pepper. And she blew up. It's never enough for you. Whatever I do, it's never enough for you. I spend all day doing this for you, and this is what you do. You tell me that it's not good, and you criticize me, and that's my life with you. And she walked out of the room. And he was like, what the hell happened here? I just said it needed red pepper. But because she came from the violence, because there was always criticism, because she was so fearful, what she heard was, from that, talk about triggers, she often would go back, have flashbacks when these things occurred. She was that little child being yelled at and being beaten, or hearing her mother being beaten and being fearful. And so we had to calm things down in the relationship for her husband to understand that he needed to be a little patient with her, that of course, it was awful for him, but he needed to understand that until she did some more healing, that, she was raw. This woman was just raw and exposed and easily wounded. And so now not everybody is going to be so sensitive, but there are going to be these sensitivities that there have to be when you're wounded over and over again. Another legacy, connecting love to pain. If love is connected to pain, then that's what you're going to think love is about. When a child witnesses his mother being abused, and then dad goes over and hugs mom and says, "Oh, I love you and I'm so sorry," that's love being connected to pain. When a child is abused themselves, and the parent, mother or father, then says, "I'm really sorry, I really love you, you know how important you are to me," that's connecting love to pain. And that's the association that the adult child makes in their brain, that in order to have love, there has to be pain. So you're always ever watchful for one without the other, with the other. So is it worth letting the good feelings come up for you? Because you know something bad is going to happen. You know that it's going to be taken away from you. Letting someone in is to risk being hurt, rejected, and in the end, abandoned. So what do? Well, maybe you don't want to be hurt and abandoned, so you sabotage things. I'm not going to let this other person control what's going to go wrong here. I'm going to control it. I'm going to sabotage it. Now, that's not a cognitive thought process, a conscious, I am going to do this, but that's what happens because the fear inside is so deep and so prevalent. So I'm going to sabotage. I am going to reject you. And then you can't hurt me because I'm rejecting you. So I have the power here. When the pain is too great and the fear is too great, rejecting love is the only option. Why take the risk at all of being hurt and of being abandoned? So these adult children of violence may sabotage their relationships without meaning to or wanting to, because remember that this is what you want most. This is what we all want, loving connection. But when you don't have the solid experience of what loving connection is about, you're not going to be able to hold it very well. You're not going to be able to maintain it very well. You're not going to be able to trust it very well because your experience is your experience and you don't know that it can be any different. And so rather than be hurt, you're going to make sure that you're the one that's in control and you're going to push it away. When you get the message that when you grow up in a violent family, when you don't get the nurturing that you receive, when you don't get the comfort that you need, the feeling is that you're not deserving of love. And there's something defective, there's something wrong with you. So that's the message that the children receive. So letting love in means that if I let you in to love me, then you're going to see that I am defective. You're going to see that I'm not worth loving and that I'm not of value. And so I can't let you in to see that about me. Being in control, another legacy. I talked a little bit about it. Because these adult children of violence felt so vulnerable and so powerless, they've made the decision that they're going to manage and control the people in their lives. They're going to tell others what to do and who to be and how to be. You're not going to control me anymore. They have developed a hard protective shell in order to take care of themselves. And so they push people away. They're constantly pushing people away and trying to manage everybody's activities all of the time and everybody's thoughts. These are tough people to live with. These are tough people to work for. These are tough people to have friendships with. But you need to know that when you try to be in control, when a person tries to be in control, it's because they feel so out of control, because they feel so powerless. When you feel empowered, you don't need to control anyone. You don't need to manage anyone. You want to support other people's power. You want to support healthy relationships in which you negotiate your differences. You don't want to say to someone, I win, you lose. Well, maybe you do, but in a healthy relationship, you withhold that, and then you say, all right, I'll own this, and we'll work this out together, and I'm going to listen to you, and I care about what you think, and I care about what you say. And I'm sorry I said, or I'm sorry I did, and you show up. And that's what you do in a healthy relationship when you've learned that model. But if you haven't had that model when you were growing up, how do you know how to be? We are not born with the knowledge of how to be in relationships. It's something we really need to learn. And in our healthy families, we learn that. Some of that, because it's a skill. I mean, I truly think that it's a skill that you need to learn, that you need to be aware of, and you need to practice on one another. Being in a relationship is, as one friend said to me, she said, relationships are a disappointment. And at the time I thought, oh, she must be really having difficulty in her marriage. But relationships are a disappointment, and they are because we're not perfect. We're not perfect beings, and there's no perfect other. You know, we expect so much. We meet people, we fall in love, and you know, even with friendships with women, I'll say that women are so relational, we're so connected to one another, we kind of fall in love with one another. And then we always get disappointed because we're only human. We say the wrong things and we do the wrong things, and we don't necessarily do it intentionally, but we fail each other. So, where was I? I got lost in my little speech here. I love it. Being disappointed in relationships. That it's natural that people are going to disappoint us. And you know what I have found in my life. Please come in. Hello. Please come in. It's okay. It's actually not a terrible thing to have a disagreement with someone, to argue about something, to be disappointed. And the reason I say that is because it's really what happens afterward that really makes the difference. It's how you heal that. It's how you talk about it. It's how you listen to one another. It's how you show respect for one another. So not agreeing on everything is fine, and people can't, and it's not possible to agree on everything. There's no perfect relationship, and don't even begin to look for it. Just begin to look at the essence of the person. But that's a whole other talk that I do. Another legacy is giving yourself away. And what can happen often for these adult children of violence is that they are so needy and want love so much that they give themselves away to others, hoping that this person will love them, this person will nurture them, this person will feed them, this person will give them what they didn't receive and what they so want. And so often what they'll do is idealize this other, make this person into the perfect other, who's going to be loving and generous and kind and caregiving and everything that they didn't have and everything they needed. But what may happen is that they may overwhelm this other person with all of their needs and all of their dependencies. And this other person may fail to meet their needs because their needs are so great. And so when that happens, then they're disappointed. And then they're angry because they have been rejected again. And then they're in pain. And they're back where they started from. Because they're not a whole self within themselves. Because they've looked to someone else to fill up the void inside. And of course, there's a void inside. And I want you to understand that these children have been through so much pain and so much loss and such chaos and such craziness that there's no way that they're not going to grow up with holes inside that need to be filled, and that they're going to look to others to take care of them. But you know, if they don't feel whole, then remember what I said. They don't feel deserving of love. So then they're stuck here because I really can't let love in, and they're going to seek others who emotionally aren't available to them. That's the danger, that they will migrate to people because we are always attracted to what's familiar to us. And so they may end up in relationships with others who can't meet their emotional needs. So there's all these variations on what happens in their adult relationships in terms of intimacy. They reject love, they get too needy, they give themselves away, they manipulate love, they control love. When they manipulate love, they can be very seductive in their relationships and trying to get what they need, and then when they don't, they can get very enraged. They can make their partners jump through hoops and, pass all kinds of tests. Prove to me that you love me. And they drive themselves and everybody else crazy, because who can live like that in that kind of chaos? No matter how many times one person says to the other, I love you, don't you know I love you? Why don't you believe that I love you? Look at all the things. Well, then just do this one more thing and prove that you love me. And they wear each other out, because who can tolerate that? Another legacy is believing that you have failed. When you can't stop dad from hurting mom, when you can't stop mom from yelling at your siblings. You carry critical inner messages that say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not deserving enough. As a result, you judge and you blame yourself for everything and have unrealistic expectations of yourself. Like the woman who worked full-time, had a child, her husband wasn't home very much, he worked a lot, did everything that moms have to do, and came home from work, picked up her daughter at daycare, came home from work, and the little girl said, oh, Mommy, we have to have cupcakes tomorrow. We have to have 30 cupcakes, and you have to make them tonight. And it was, by the time she got home and they had dinner, it was like 8 o'clock. She was exhausted. And she said, okay. But she couldn't do it. So in the morning, she ran to the grocery store and got cupcakes and dropped them off and came in and talked about how guilty she felt. And what a terrible mother she was, because she had gone to the store and bought store-bought cupcakes for the kids when she, as a mom, should have stayed up and made cupcakes. I mean, it was, crazy thinking. And she just went on and on and on about how awful she was as a mother. Unrealistic expectations coming from the craziness in her family and who she was supposed to be, who she was expected to be. Feeling defeated. Another legacy. No matter how hard they try, nothing can change. That's the feeling of these adult children. No matter what they did at home, no matter how good they tried to be, the craziness still happened. They couldn't do anything to change it. When father said, I won't hit you again, I promise, and hit them again, or hit their mother, or when mom said, if dad ever does anything again, we're leaving, and never left, you kind of give up. You kind of feel like nothing's ever going to be different. There's nothing I can do. This is the way the world is. I give in. As one woman told me, who came in for therapy, and she did some work, and then at some point she said, I don't really know why I'm here. I mean, she came in talking about other things, but it was really about her marriage, and that's what happens a lot. People come in and say, this is the problem, and yet, months later, it's really something else that they came in for, but were too afraid to address. And she said, nothing is ever going to change. Nothing is ever going to be different. So I don't even know why I'm here. And when I tried to point out the work that she had done and the changes that she had made and the things that she had realized and the shifts that had taken place, she said, yeah, but nothing else is going to change. Well, you know what? It won't. It won't change. If that's what you believe, if you believe nothing will change, nothing will change. Our thoughts create our experiences, and our experiences are our realities. So in order to make things change, we need to change our thoughts. And so she left therapy, and that was the end of it. And it was heartbreaking for me because I couldn't get through. But I have to also realize that I can't make someone do what they're not ready to do. And she just wasn't ready to work on that next part of her life. And that's important to recognize, that if you know someone who's going through trauma, if you know someone who's struggling as a result of trauma, and you can talk to them till they're blue in the face and feel so frustrated and feel so helpless, but until someone is willing to do the work, to commit and put the energy into it, nothing can shift. And it's very difficult, and it's, frustrating for, I have people in my family, and it's very hard for me. I can't get through to them. And what do you do with that? It's painful. And here I am, a clinician. I'm supposed to know it all. Well, I don't. I only know what I know. And I understand that we're all on our own journeys. We are all going down our own paths. And we'll all do things when we're ready to do them, or we won't do them at all. And we have to let people go at their own pace. I get parents who come in and try to, talk about what are we going to do. Our son is an alcoholic, and he's, destroying his marriage, and he's destroying his life, and he won't listen to me. And it's really frightening, and I see he's being abusive, and with his wife, and I can't intervene, and it's horrible. It's a horrible place of helplessness and frustration. But sometimes you can't, there's nothing that you can do but give people information and support and resources. Repeating negative patterns and themes, maintaining the victim label, another legacy, maintaining the victim label. This is a real hard one. People replicating patterns in negative relationships and having negative thoughts and negative feelings, and keep getting involved in negative situations, seeing themselves as failures, seeing themselves never having a better life. I am a victim, and this is my life. And that's, I think, the saddest legacy, is feeling that nothing can change, and feeling that everything that happens is because you're a victim of your own life. And that, to me, is the most frightening thought of all. And if there's one thing that I really try to do with people, it is to teach them that they are not victims, that they can counter these thoughts and these feelings, and that empowering themselves is freeing themselves. And sometimes it can take a long time for them to learn to hold on to this. But it's frightening when you say to yourself, I'm a victim of my life, and there's nothing I can do to change it. That's not true, but it's how these adult children walk around and feel. And they feel sorry for themselves because they're so wounded, because they've been so hurt and so devastated. Becoming addicted. That's another legacy. That in order to manage and cope with the pain, these children, adult children, get addicted to drugs, get addicted to alcohol, are addicted to eating. They will binge eat, or they will starve themselves. Become workaholics, shopaholics, sexual addictions, anything that can numb you or give you an immediate rush, to block out the pain, to get some relief. Well, they deserve relief, but this isn't the road to go down. This only makes you more of a victim and puts you deeper into the hole. But it's understandable that you would want relief. And for a lot of these kids, there's a whole science of neurobiology around trauma and what happens to the brain when there's early trauma, and how there are shifts in the brain that occur as a result of trauma. And it's a fascinating field. But and the younger that children are when they are violated, when they experience trauma, the more detrimental the damage to the brain is in terms of this. As a psychotherapist, I'm clearly dealing with a lot of addictions, and I'm dealing with people who, turn to drugs and turn to alcohol to get rid of the fear that they're constantly dealing with. So, the treatment is, it's AA and group therapy and individual therapy and anything supportive, so that they know that there's a safety net for them, and then they're not alone anymore. And then another legacy is physical disorders. And that also is very common. I worked in a pain management program, and you know, in doing histories, I found that there was quite a connection between pain, physical pain, and depression. And that a lot of these adult children suffer from back pain and headaches and all kinds of psychosomatic disorders that are real. I mean, the pain is real. But you know, when anybody walks into my office, I have this kind of joke. If you walk in and you're limping, I'm going to say, "What can't you stand today?" So, you know, and they'll look at me like, "What do you mean?" And I'll say, "Okay, what's going on?" Because there is a mind-body connection. We're not just, you know, our heads and our emotions. We're all one, and it's all connected. And when you don't deal with what's going on emotionally, it's going to come out in your body. It has to come out somewhere. So when something happens for you, just I want you to think about, you know, how is this connected, and how is this headache? What can't I shoulder? You know, what's going on with my back? You know, what is too heavy for me? What is too hard for me? It's very interesting when you start making this connection. Of course, then you can drive yourself crazy with everything. But I've even seen cancer, women with breast cancer who have recently lost mothers, and I find that fascinating, that there's so much grief and pain. I mean, that's the mammary gland, and I don't know. I haven't done any studies here, but I'm sure there are studies out there that there's a connection there. These adult children from violent families have not been allowed to develop a solid inner core and a solid inner foundation so that they can function in the world in a healthy manner. They haven't developed their own strong voices that can say to them, "I'm okay. I will be okay. The world is okay. I am capable. I am competent. I am worthy. I am worthy of being loved. I am deserving. I am deserving of being loved." They never feel that they're good enough. So that's the horrible part. This is the sad part, what I've just talked about. The childhood, the trauma, the legacies. It's pretty awful. It's pretty terrible to think that children have to grow up like this. It's not acceptable. You know, and I'm grateful to those of you out here who are doing the work with these women and who are doing the work with these children and who are supporting them and giving them a place to get needs met. So let's talk about getting their needs met. Let's talk about healing. Let's talk about hope. Let's talk about how these children, adult children, can have the promise of a future and a life that's got meaning and purpose. The goals of trauma healing are multifold, and they include learning to acknowledge and let go of the painful mind and body memories that have been festering within. To give people a sense that they have control over their lives and the belief that they have control over their lives and that they can learn to empower themselves. To become aware of the emotional triggers that undermine them and to learn to cope with them creatively. So let me talk a little bit about the emotional triggers. I had mentioned that having a flashback is when someone gets triggered, and it can happen, and it doesn't have to, it can happen at any moment, at any time, anywhere. And that's what's so uncomfortable about them. They can overhear conversation. They can hear a piece of music on the radio. They have these sense memories. A smell can evoke a trigger. And when it happens, it just is overwhelming in the moment. And so teaching people to manage these triggers is not so complicated. Excuse me. Firstly, it's developing an awareness of what your triggers are. And what kinds of things triggered you. And it's really, you really need to know where you came from and the kinds of things that can cause this to happen. But when you're triggered, it's teaching people to recognize that they're in that trigger moment, they're in that flashback moment, and to take a step back and observe it, and to breathe, maybe, to move, to get active, physically active, to ground themselves, to do things like, I am here in this room and it is a big space and there's an exit sign over there, and this woman, Marilyn, is wearing an orange jacket, and Jacqueline is wearing a black jacket with red on it. It's getting that focused and that clear. So I am here in this space. I am not 5 years old being frightened. And to say to themselves, this was frightening for me, but I am the adult now. I am not the child. I do not need to be afraid. I am here. This is now. I am present. And I am safe. So teaching people how to deal with triggers is really important and essential. And it's one of the most essential things to do in treatment. Another goal is to try to find some deeper meaning in what happened, which may sound a little odd. You know, how could you find a meaning, a deeper meaning in all of this pain and grief and craziness and chaos? What are you talking about? Well, I may be kind of a Pollyanna, but I think that life has lots of lessons to teach us, and that everything is a teaching experience. I do believe that life is a challenge, that life is very difficult, and sometimes you can feel like you're being tested all of the time. You get through one thing and then something else happens. But you know what? It's really not all about us. That's the victim thinking. It's usually not about us at all. It's about how things appear to us. It's just how things happen in the world. And that it's all about what you believe, and it's all about your mindset. And if something happens and you can look at it as, all right, what do I want to do with this? You're responding to it rather than, oh my God, this is a tragedy, this is a terrible thing. If you look at life as, this is put in front of me, this is an obstacle on my path. So what do I want to do with it? Now, we're all on a journey somehow, and we're all being confronted with obstacles. So what do you do with these obstacles? How do you manage them? So trauma healing is really about teaching people how to deal with the obstacles that they have encountered along their journeys. And to be not just a person who survives. I know that we, refer to survivors of abuse as survivors. I really think it's bigger than that. I want to look at people as thrivers. I want people to look at themselves, not just I survived this, but I did something with this. I created something for myself. I created something for my life. Maybe I'm a better parent because I'm conscious and aware of what happened for me. Maybe I create a business that I never thought I would do, but growing up in this family gave me some strength that enabled me to move from this situation. That my life is not all about my pain. In fact, I don't want it to be anything about my pain, but what I might have learned from the pain that I experienced. I know that we'd like to put a bubble around all our children. I know that I wanted to do that with my daughter. And I couldn't, because life is life, and we all have our lessons to learn. Best thing we can do for our kids is to love them and be clear with them and be there for them, and then let them go out into the world. But I still actually do this little exercise. This is a wonderful little exercise. You should all know how to do this. It's to envision that there's a sphere of golden light around you, or a white light around you, and that you're safe within that light. And so this is one of the grounding techniques that I would use with clients, is surround yourself in a pyramid of white light and breathe in that light and know that you are safe within that light. and know that this light is here to heal you, and nothing bad will happen to you. And just do it now. I love this. Just do it. Surround yourself. Just envision there's a pyramid of white light around you, and just breathe it in. And this light is there to heal you and to comfort you and protect you. Isn't that a nice feeling? And so what I do is I surround everybody I love with white light. When my daughter comes to visit and she drives home at night, and I worry about her because she lives in the city, I surround her car with white light. And we were once on a plane, and it was like this. It was really turbulent. And everybody was nervous. I mean, it wasn't just me. Everybody was, oh my God. And I said, Elizabeth, surround the plane with white light. She said, are you serious? I said, yes, surround the plane. Come on, just do it. Just do it. So close your eyes, surround the plane with white light. So we did it. And I guarantee you 5 seconds later, the turbulence stopped. Now, of course, I'm not saying because of me, but it sure felt good. So it's a nice little thing to know, and it's empowering. It's empowering. Healing takes place when the connection to internal pain has been broken. The result is a coherent, connected, healthy understanding of who you are, what you think, and what you feel. It's a process of becoming whole that requires committing to change, making the choice to change and allowing change to occur. So what you really need to do here is you need to let go of the life you've been living and of the thoughts that you've been having that keep you stuck in the place that you are. So that's the end. I'm letting go of what doesn't work for me, of what's toxic for me, of what's painful for me. Now that's hard to do. It's easy to say, but I could spend a year talking to someone about letting go, and they don't want to let go. And why would you not want to let go? And when I ask people, why are you holding on to this? You know what they say? Anybody have a guess of what they would say? It's what they know. That's exactly it. I'm comfortably uncomfortable with this. I know how to be this person. I know how to think these thoughts. I know what these feelings are. If I let go of the self that I am, the self that I have been. So who am I? That's a very frightening thing, especially when you have so little self to begin with. But the process is to try to build in some inner supports. And the next phase is this middle phase of inventing yourself, basically, becoming the person, working on becoming the person that you want to be. And that's very difficult for some people because you don't know what the outcome is. And you're wandering around and you feel like you're in a desert. And you don't know who you are. You don't know who's in your world. You don't know what you want. And, and that's what the therapy process is really about. It's really about providing a safe space for someone to explore who they can become. And when they've moved through that process, they move into the beginning phase. This is who I am now. And this is how I can fulfill my own potential. It's a beautiful process. It's really hard. But it's also something that happens with transition. And there's a wonderful book called Transitions, and the author is Bill Bridges. Do you love that? Bill Bridges? Transitions. I just love it. And he is a wonderful, genuine guy who talks about this three-stage theory of transitioning. And when you think about it, isn't life just full of transitions? Isn't it happening all the time from the moment we're born until the moment we die? Aren't we always in transition? Aren't we always letting go of something? So if you know that that's okay to do and that's the normal process of life and that change is ever present, nothing stays the same ever. And that's what life is, and learning to accept back to the challenges, that life is challenging, and that this isn't about me, this is just life happening, and that I need to figure it out. So I'm trying to really normalize the experience of everyday living for everybody, that these things happen to all of us. We all struggle, we all go through our struggles, We all worry. We all have fears. Who doesn't? And, how do we manage all of this? But that these adult children need even more skills and even more tools, because there's more damage that's been done, and they never were allowed to develop a whole self. So, steps to healing. Being conscious and being aware. Paying attention. Letting go of denial. Educating yourself. Understanding triggers, which I've already talked about, and what to do when you're triggered. Asking for help. Asking for help is hard for someone who never had anyone to ask for help from before, because the very people that were supposed to be there to help them weren't there to help them. So how do you begin to trust that others can be there for you? It's a tough one. But finding supports, getting, these people into therapy, into a safe space, developing support systems for them, gives them the safety net to do the work that they need to do, and to be in a place where they are listened to and their experiences are affirmed, and for them to know that they are not crazy. I keep saying crazy because crazy is what they knew. It's what they grew up with. It's what they internalized. Crazy. So they don't know what normal is. I don't know what normal is either, probably, but expectable and reasonable. That consequences to behaviors were crazy. They weren't rational. They weren't reasonable. They don't know what reasonable and rational is, and so they're guessing all of the time. Another step to healing is learning how to tune in and trust your feelings. That's a big one, because you had to deny your feelings. How do you trust your feelings when you had to deny your feelings? I worked with a woman who had grown up in one of these families, and for the first 2 years, she had no idea what she felt. No clue. No clue. What she didn't remember a lot of her childhood. I'd say, what are you feeling now? I don't know. Could you guess? If you had to guess, what do you think it could be? And she'd guess, and it would be interesting because it would be an intellectual guess, but she was usually right on, because part of her really knew, but she was trained to shut down because she couldn't have survived in her family if she let her emotions up. And so actually, recently she came in and she talked about something that had happened to her and how she had felt about it. It was, and we talked about the incident, and then she said, I knew what I felt. I knew what I felt. It was like such a celebration. She knew what she felt in the moment. It was such a wonderful thing. She had empowered herself. She felt safe enough to have her feelings and to voice. She had spoken up to someone, which was in an appropriate way, Because the next thing is discovering your own voice and giving your own voice power. Well, when you're shut down, when you're not allowed to express yourself, you have no voice. So it's really important to recognize the internal voices, the internal critical voices that are going on inside all the time. No, you can't do that. No, you're not good enough. No, you're not smart enough. Don't try that. This bad thing is going to happen to you. Whose critical voice is that? It's most likely someone in the family. I want to say, though, that there are powerful people in children's lives who are not family members. We know priest abuse. We know that there can be abusive teachers, that children can get abused by, a neighbor or a babysitter. That's traumatic, and if it goes on over time, of course, these kids are going to have the same issues. If they couldn't go to their family and say, this is what's going on for me. But that's a whole other thing. But giving your own voice power, recognizing, a lot of the work is recognizing that you have a voice and that you had so much to say and know where to express it and know when to listen to you. So what I have to do with people is, when I'm doing the work, teaching them about their voice, recognizing their own tiny little voice, which is in there, very quiet, whispering. And they start to develop this voice. I have to teach them to modulate the voice, because what happens when people find their voices, they start yelling. And this just happened with a woman I'm working with who is just discovering her voice and that she has power, and she was not very nice. She gave some feedback to her daughter's mother-in-law. She wrote a letter, a critical letter, thinking that she was, doing something positive and expressing herself about something that was very upsetting to her. Oh my God. So she came in and she said, "I'm in trouble." I said, "What did you do?" So she told me about this letter. Oh my God. I said, you sent the letter? I said, "No, you never send letters. Never, never. Don't send letters. Don't, unless you've held on to it for a couple of weeks, read it, had other people read it, because it's really a dangerous thing." So now, we talked about because her daughter's furious with her. The daughter's mother-in-law is furious. Thanksgiving's coming up, and the daughter was disinvited from Thanksgiving. It's horrible. It's a horrible. So what she did was, and this was really good because this was still holding on to her power. She made a mistake, and she made a mistake because she didn't have any experience speaking up. And then when she was allowed and gave herself permission, this poor woman who'd been so abused, was finally at a place where she could say to somebody, "This isn't okay. Oh my God." She screamed it at the wrong person and said the wrong things. So she called this woman up and she apologized. She owned her part. She said, "I am sorry. I was wrong. I never should have said those things. I apologize." Well, unfortunately, it was the husband who took the call, and the wife wouldn't get on the phone. So she called again, and she left a message. And then she sent a gift basket. And then she said, "Okay, I'm going to leave another message." I said, "No, more messages. It's enough. It's enough. Your message is clear." And I think that, you need to give her time to calm down. And actually, the mother-in-law, made up with the daughter-in-law, and so that's okay, and it's just, they have to bridge this somehow. But, she made a mistake, but she owned the mistake, and that was powerful. That was so powerful. I made a mistake, and I recognize that. And that's what a healthy person does. A healthy person sees where they have screwed up and says, "I messed up here. Okay, I'm human," and learns from that. Like, this woman won't be writing any more letters to anybody ever again. I guarantee you, she will never do that again. And if she wants to say something, I know what she'll do is check it out first, and that's what she needs to do until she gets used to this new way of being and thinking and feeling and expressing herself. Recognizing and releasing fears. So that's another big one, because these children, adult children, are walking around in this very fearful place, and and their fearful thoughts are everywhere about everything. So recognizing fears is, just when you are conscious of your thoughts, you'll be aware of the messages that you're giving to yourself. And then when you are aware that you are having a fearful thought, then you can truly say, "I release you, I let you go, and I'm replacing this thought with this other thought." So that's another way of speaking to yourself and empowering yourself and taking care of yourself. Trusting instincts and your inner wisdom. You know that we all have intuition. They call it feminine intuition. We all have. Men have intuition too. It's really true. And learn to trust your inner feelings. When you have a feeling inside about something, whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, deep inside yourself, trust that. Too often we get caught up in the shoulds, what we should be doing, who we should be, being who we're expected to be, and not trusting our own feelings. And these children have not been allowed that experience. And so learning to trust their instincts is such a gift. When you can go inside and say, what is it I really need to do? What is the right thing inside for me? What feels right to me? That's how you check it inside. What feels like the right thing to me? Maybe if I do this, it's not going to be easy. You know, maybe it's a difficult decision, but it feels like the right thing. And if I look back on it, I'll know that I did the right thing. So learning to trust your inner self. And if you trust your inner self, you will always be guided to the right place. You will always end up where you need to be. Empowering yourself. And that means all of the things that have preceded this, setting appropriate limits and boundaries, because these adult children didn't have appropriate limits and boundaries. Saying no, that often these adult children give too much of themselves. They want to be loved. And so how do you get loved? You give yourself away. So learning to say no in order to say yes to yourself first. Taking care of yourself. To be empowered is to believe in your ability to be who you are, who you choose to be, who you want to be. Your energy is clear. You stop and you think and you respond rather than react from your wisest self. Empowering yourself is paying attention to your needs, honoring your needs, honoring your feelings, honoring your thoughts. Allowing yourself to be who you are and who you want to be, not who someone else has told you you're supposed to be. Not being who you think you should be to get what you need, but truly loving your own self and your own spirit. Living in the present and not grieving the past. Being here and being now. Paying attention what you want to happen. Visualizing it. Creating it. Have any of you heard of a vision board? Anybody know what that is? It's a wonderful device, and I have many at home. I do them myself, and I ask my clients to create vision boards. So let's say, for example, that you want a new job, and you have something in mind about what it could be. So what I would say to you is go to a magazine, look at pictures, cut out words, put them on a big poster board, and create a picture, a vision of what you want, whether it's a relationship, whatever it is that you want, whether it's about your health, whether it's about whatever your children, whatever it is that you want to happen, create this vision board, visualize it. Remember, our thoughts create our experiences. You can actually create the life that you want to be living. You have the power to do that. We all have the power to do that. So you put this board up and you look at it 15, 20 times a day, and you think about it and you bring the message inside yourself. And I'll tell you something, miracles will happen, wonderful things will happen. My husband, laughs at me because, I always tell him I'm going to ask the universe for whatever it is I want. And he'll say, all right, go ahead and ask the universe. And my friends see that things happen and they'll say, this universe thing really works for you. Could you ask the universe for me? No, ask it for yourself. It's you that wants it. You have to bring it in. But visualizing allows people to see the potential in their lives and what they can have. Find meaning in your life, and I talked about that before. Ask yourself. Ask your own selves. You're not necessarily children from these families, but what life lessons have you learned? What has your life been like, and what has each event taught you about yourself? And do you know that everyone you come in contact with has a message for you? It's a very interesting concept that interactions are really important with others, and that if we listen, we're going to get some nice message that we need to learn. So look at life's gifts. The most important step to healing and living one's life is bringing in loving connections, because that's what we all want, that's what we all need, that's what we all deserve. So, an important step to healing is for these adult children to build support systems, to bring people in, to learn to trust one at a time, people that love them and that they can feel confident in trusting. Relationships are grounding, they're fulfilling, they're centering. Here's the next step to healing, and that's about joy, bringing joy in and holding on to it. That's a hard one because these adult children are afraid that that's going to be taken away. If I have a good feeling, it's like the love-pain thing. If I have a good feeling, then a bad thing is going to happen. But teaching them that they're allowed to have joy in their life, that they actually have to learn to give themselves permission to have joy, to feel joy, to experience joy. Think about that. Give yourself permission that it's okay, and that doesn't mean something bad can happen, and that they can hold on to the joy. To exercise, eat, and sleep. Take care of your body, not just your mind. And to laugh every day. That laughter is the best thing in the whole world. So I'll tell you this very silly story. This has nothing to do with, this has to do with empowerment, actually. My own. And it's a dream that I had once, and whenever I kind of feel blue or kind of powerless, I think about this dream. So in this dream, I was flying naked over the Israeli army as they were marching. and they were singing. And then they looked up and saw me and started to applaud. How empowering is that? So I'll just leave you with that the whole point of healing is to give birth to the self that you were meant to be and that you deserve to be. I will now take questions or comments, or we can have a conversation. I presented so much. It was a lot. Or the comment. The comment was very interesting about PTSD, and is there a difference between a woman who is experiencing ongoing trauma as opposed to maybe a soldier on the battlefield who then leaves the war and comes home, where there's a break, where they get the opportunity to heal? Because that would be the difference, wouldn't it? That there's the opportunity to leave the traumatic situation and to work on the healing process, whereas a woman who is ongoing, experiencing trauma, is constantly traumatized. There's no break, there's no relief. That's just the condition of her life. And I didn't know that there being a new definition of PTSD. I think that is yes, I think I've never thought about it, but of course it is, that the abuse is ongoing, or the threat of abuse is ongoing.
So
and
it's
so
a different experience.
it's like being a prisoner of war, I would think.
Yes.
I mean, it is, you are a prisoner of war. That's what can't, yeah. All right, the request is that I address the issue of ongoing trauma for children when there's a separation going on, or divorce. Oh my God, that's a...
As a result of having connection still with the abusive parent.
Well, as a result of having connection with the abusive parent, it's so complicated that I'll say a few things about it. I mean, it's huge. I mean, that's another workshop. For one thing, children always want to be loved by their parents, and they always want connection to their parents, and they always want a relationship with their parents, even when there has been abuse. It's very confusing for them. And so, you know, and then, you know, it's complicated because, you know, are we talking about children who have witnessed violence but have never been abused themselves? Are we talking about children who are subject to abuse? We're talking about all of this, and there are different conditions and different situations. And I know that there are women who have left their marriages where they have been abused, whether it's been physically or whether it's been verbally or emotionally. But the kids have not been, and dad can be Disneyland dad for them, or dad can be someone they're afraid of, or dad could be, you know, if these kids align with dad or want to spend time with dad, then they're betraying their mom. So put that on top of whatever it is they've experienced themselves, and that's why I say it's so complicated. It's not, everybody is in turmoil and everybody is in pain, and it is chronic, and everything that I talked about in terms of children witnessing violence, all of that is going to continue if mom has a court order and dad is violating it, or dad is still threatening mom and mom is fearful. And but I also can say that yes, that dads will try to one of the power things for them is to turn the children against mom. Mom is the bad one and mom deserves this and mom brought this on herself. And so they're trying to get the children to align with dad. But mom can also say, look what your father did to me, and look at how fearful we all are, and I don't want you to spend time with him because he's bad. So, it's not clear cut. It's messy and horrible, and these kinds of things just so rarely get resolved. I mean, it's just because the courts don't pay the kind of attention they need to, because they don't give women the support, because dad has money and can pay for the lawyer and mom can't pay for the lawyer, so dad gets the smart lawyer and gets the custody, and mom is terrified. It's just, I don't even have enough words to, it's horrible, and there's no easy solution to this. But yes, there is ongoing trauma for the children. And so that response was, you can't necessarily cut the ties with the parents, with either parent, because mom could be the abuser as well. And I have to just say that dad could be fighting for the kids, because I've had that happen. And mom was verbally and physically abusive or neglectful, and dad wanted to have custody of the kids to protect them. But taking children away from their parents, either one of them, is traumatic for the children, no matter what the situation is. That's why I'm saying it's never good. There's no good result here. It's just horrible that it's a rare and resilient child who can understand why there needs to be the separation from the parent. And in fact, this is interesting that you say this, because just this afternoon I had TiVo'd Oprah, and it was on separation and divorce, and that's one of my specialty areas, and I've run parenting workshops on divorce, and she had a therapist on, and he was interviewing these two children, a son and a daughter, whose mother had left them, and they hadn't seen her for like a year and a half, and the son was 3 when mom left, and the daughter was maybe 6, and so they were 5 and 8. And at first the little boy was saying, I don't want to see my mommy anymore. She left me, and I don't love her anymore. But 10 minutes later he was crying, and he was saying, but I do want my mommy, but I want the good mommy. I want the good mommy to come back. And it was so heartbreaking. And so you're right that children want their parents to be together. They want a family, and they want a normal family. But sometimes they'll even take a crazy family because they just want a family.
And the parent can do that to the child as well.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure if someone feels really insecure and feels really threatened by the child, I mean, there's mother, I do a talk about mother-daughter relationships, and I talk about if a mother has low self-esteem, she may really resent her daughter being successful. That on one hand she may feel, my daughter being successful is a reflection on me, and isn't that great? But on the other hand, now it shows me that I'm not good enough and she's better than I am, and they may be very undermining and critical. So yeah, I could see that a parent could be threatened by a really bright child if they didn't have the means, or if they have low self-esteem and they want power. I could see, I don't know studies about this, but I could see that would be an issue. Of course, what you want is to heal these children. But when there's chaos and craziness, and mom is scared, or, and dad is threatening, and, how can these families get help? The whole point is, we would love to intervene in these families and save these children.
Well, if the woman divorces.
Well, yes.
That's no further.
Right. Well, I mean, everybody needs to get into therapy. Everybody needs to get into therapy right away. The whole family needs to get into therapy. I mean, you know, the perpetrators aren't likely to, but certainly the rest of the family needs to have family therapy. The children need individual and family therapy. The wife needs individual and family therapy because they have to learn how to be a healthy family together. They don't know how to relate to one another. They don't know how to communicate. They have to all deal with the trauma. Who are we going to be after this experience? And of course, that's what we really want. How is this therapeutic work done in an era of managed care? Well, I'll tell you one thing, I don't take insurance. So, and I have a sliding scale. And part of the reason I went off insurances was because it was so demeaning. They lowered their fees on me. They check you. You have to expose people in writing to prove that they are worthy of treatment, and you are required to give a medical diagnosis. So you are labeling these people, and it goes out everywhere. And I just said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm pretty experienced. I know what I'm doing. I'm offering my services. I'll slide. I'll work it out with you. It's pretty reasonable. In the managed care model, it's very hard because therapists are so busy, and in large systems, the clinicians, you know, will see you every 3 weeks. You can't do that. You can't give little, you know, it doesn't work very well. And not that there aren't good clinicians who do good work, because there are, but people have to be prepared to pay out of pocket. I mean, that's a reality, and I'm sorry to say it, but I personally, if I had to go to therapy, I mean, I have gone to therapy and paid out of pocket. I don't want this written, and I don't want it out there. So, you know, if people really can't afford services and really have to use their insurance, then they get pieces. And they do it in chunks, and that's what you do. Maybe you spread it out a little bit, you know, and you do your 20 sessions a year, and then you wait. And then you can get lost. It's very hard. It's a real ethical issue for clinicians, and it's why I decided not to do it anymore, because it became an ethical issue, and I just got tired of fighting for people. I'd have to call these insurance people, and I'd have to plead with them to give me extra sessions. And sometimes I'd have to make the case that, you know, that the person was, their mental health was more severe, you know, their problems were more severe than maybe what they were, and that didn't feel right to me. Why would I want to do that to somebody? It's horrible. It's a horrible place, but a really good question. Yes?
What if you're a grandmother and you suspect the child is being verbally abused?
You know, what if you're a grandmother and you suspect that your grandchild is being verbally abused? Well, I guess it depends on if it's your son or daughter who's doing the abuse, who's being abusive, and how you might approach that is talking about self-esteem and how vulnerable children are and what words mean to children. And, you know, maybe sort of skirting around it at first in a gentle way. You know, maybe talking about, you know, I might have said something to you when you were growing up, and now I'm thinking about it, or I'm reading this book, and just having a discussion about the book, sort of making it not about them at first, so just to try to move in gently, because, you know, you're taking a risk that the person, the child, your child may be reject you and not let you see your grandchild, and it's horrible. And making sure that you're there for that child, and that you're kind and you're loving and you're supportive and you're nurturing, because, you know, I didn't say this, but this is so important, that when children are growing up in pain, if there's one person in their life who can give them something, some nurturing, some kindness, some support. It could be anybody. One man whose father beat everyone in the family. It was horrible. And he came from a very large family, and he was the only one in the family who ended up being okay. Everybody else was a mess, and alcoholics, and abusive, and on welfare, craziness. He ended up as a professional. And why? Because there was a next-door neighbor, a man next door, who mentored him, who took him under his wing, who taught him things, who was a father to him, and gave him hope. And so he ended up okay. And I think that if a teacher can tell a child, you're smart, or you're this, or you're that, or there's another family member, or there's a parent of another child sort of takes this kid on and supports them, then it gives them, what they need, a little bit of what they need, and they can grow from that. Yes?
It could be a safe haven for your grandkids on special weekends with grandma and grandpa.
Yes, absolutely.
Away from the environment on vacation.
That's right. You can be a safe haven for that child. That's a lovely way to put it. Yes, that's a lovely way to put it. I'm repeating for that verbal and emotional abuse are just as powerful and traumatic, if not more so, than physical abuse. How do I help my daughter to understand why I've left a verbally abusive marriage after 39 years and she's angry about it? Children, here it is, children want their parents to be together. That's what you're dealing with. She's betrayed. She's feeling abandoned. She's in her own pain, and obviously she observed you're being abused all of these years. That's what she grew up with. And she may be in her own pain about what that is, but she feels abandoned, and she's really thinking about her needs and her feelings right now, and doesn't recognize that the fact that you've ended the marriage is empowering for you, that you're in your own process of healing. If you can finally say, I'm done, I'm not going to live like this anymore, that she can't celebrate that because she's losing so much, and I think that's where she is. And so maybe, though it's difficult because you're doing something that you know you need to do, she's questioning you, it must be very hurtful for you. You must feel betrayed by her, because why can't she be supportive and say, Mom, of course this is what you need to do. I want you to do this. I want you to be healthy and whole, and I want you to be happy. So she's in tremendous conflict herself. You may have to stretch a little and, acknowledge her pain. And I bet if you acknowledge her pain in this, she may be able to take a step back and just say, what's it like for you that, now you're going to have to split holidays. You're going to have to choose. She's in her 30s. She's not 5, and she's going through the same thing though that a little kid is going through. She's going to have to choose one parent over another. And does she betray you? Does she betray her father? Who is this man that hurt her mother? Is she supposed to love him? Is she supposed to accept him into her life? If she does, what does that mean about who you are and who you've been to her? And and why didn't you take care of yourself earlier? And were you a good enough role model for her? Because those are your issues about how you've parented her, and why did you subject her to all this? I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Take a breath. Take a breath. You can't do it all at once. But, explain to her that you love her. This isn't about her, that this is about your need to take care of yourself and empower yourself, and that you're finally doing that, and that you hope at some point she'll be able to congratulate you and be happy for you. But right now, everything is in turmoil for her and her. Is she married?
No.
And
She had several long-term relationships.
that didn't work out. So she's got a lot of trust and intimacy struggles on her, and so what you're doing is, you're showing her, oh my God, relationships don't work out. Thank you. So, thank you all for coming. I'm running a workshop on empowerment. The sheets are out there. I appreciated your questions and your attention.